This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. Chapter 3 of The Shadow Rising, Reflection, and our symbol is the Dragon Fang. Despite the hour, a good many people were hurrying through the stone's wide corridors, a steady trickle of men and women in the black and gold of stone servants, or the livery of one High Lord or another. Now and again, a defender or two appeared. The servants bowed or curtsied to Perrin and Faile if they came close, then hurried on with hardly a pause. Most of the soldiers gave a start on seeing them. Some bowed stiffly, hand to heart, but one and all quickened their steps as if eager to be away. Only one lamp in 3 or 4 was lit. In the dim stretches between their tall stands, shadows blurred the hanging tapestries and obscured the occasional chest against the wall. For any eyes but Perrin's, they did. His eyes glowed like burnished gold in those murky lengths of hall. He walked quickly from lamp to lamp, and kept his gaze down unless he was in full light. Most people in the stone knew about his strangely colored eyes, one way or another. None of them mentioned it, of course. Even Faile seemed to assume the color was part of his association with an Aes Sedai, something that simply was, to be accepted, but never explained. Even so, a prickling always ran across his back whenever he realized that a stranger had seen his eyes shining in the dark. When they held their tongues, the silence only emphasized his apartness. "I wish they wouldn't look at me like that," he muttered, as a grizzled defender twice his age came close to running once he had passed, as though they are afraid of me. They haven't before, not this way. Why aren't all these people in bed? The woman carrying a mop and bucket bobbed a curtsy and scurried by with her head down.
So starting from the beginning, I'm looking at Reflection, and I wasn't really able to figure out why the name of the chapter was Reflection.
I thought it was a double meaning. So Reflections, right? And Rand's Reflections. This is the aftermath
because of the
that.
mirrors, right?
But also reflections on everything that just happened.
Okay. I like that second meaning a lot. The first one, I'm sort of like, well, that would have been a better chapter almost for this previous. But yeah, I guess it's reflecting back on the bubble of evil and figuring out what happened. Because at this point, everyone except Rand is like, why is Rand trying to kill me?
Yeah, what the hell did that crazy kid just do?
And I love the visual of Perrin's eyes glowing in the burnished dark. It's one of those things that he only mentions briefly, but I think will be so cool in the show to like have him come out of the dark eyes first.
Yeah, and he's just kind of regular. You know, I've met people that have yellow eyes. It's not impossible. It's like a real light yellowish tone.
I don't believe you.
Seriously, that one girl I used to work with, I'm not going to say her name because she's real, and I don't have her permission.
Color, would you describe their eyes? You say it's yellow tinge, but it's not like it's like yellow. Is it yellow brown or yellow blue, or is it like a green with yellow flecks?
Probably a little bit more like yellow green.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing that really makes wolf eyes different, dog eyes different from human eyes, is they have that reflective membrane in the back of their eyes that cause that mirror effect that you really don't get with people, except when you take a picture and the flash actually reflects off the back of their cornea.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's different. Okay, well, I Googled it and I'm seeing tons of pictures, but then I realized that I have no idea if this is real because I'm looking at the internet. Although they appear to be real. But I swear, she had like weird yellowy eyes that were like a dog's eyes. Might be yellow. Really light green brown. It kind of appears to be a gold color. But it was very unusual, which is why it stuck out in my mind. Tom Casey, I feel like Perrin's eyes in the show will have to be CGI because they'll have to actually glow. They'll actually have to reflect like candlelight in the darkness, you know, like a cat's or even a dog's do it.
So I'm assuming something changed with Perrin, and not only do they turn bright, but he got something called the tapetum lucidium, located between the optic nerve and the retina. It operates like a mirror, reflecting the light and allowing the rods and cones another opportunity to pick up a limited amount of light available at night. So if you want to think about what's actually giving Perrin the ability to see at night, he actually has grown a membrane that most humans don't have that causes that reflective light, and that actually helps him see because it gives the eye 2 chances to absorb the light, not just one.
Nodding. Faile goes on to explain why there are common soldiers and servants wandering around in the middle of the night. One of them is that servants often do their jobs at night because there's important things happening in these rooms during the morning. There's these, administrative meetings, blah, 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 whatever. And they don't want servants around, like, cleaning the trash while they talk about state secrets. Fair. But also, she says, nobody important is here right now, so they can wander around.
That's a good point, because they do have to, like, genuflect all the lords and stuff like that.
Faile isn't even implying. She says pretty much directly something like, this is a great opportunity to sit in the Lord's throne and cuddle your girlfriend and pretend for a moment that you're a big important person.
So it's like in the office building when the cleaning lady sits in the boss's chair and at night.
Yeah. Exactly. And
we've all done it.
I think she's wrong in this last part, but Faile also says that they're probably nervous. You're probably making them nervous because they're afraid you'll say something to all the important people that they see you as associated with. And that may be true, but I think that a lot of people see Perrin as associated with a dragon reborn, and he's scary for a different reason. Not because he's some hound for the lords. He's not associated with the lords. The lords don't even like these new people.
The servants don't know that well enough. All they see is someone important, and
they might
just
not
like,
really understand. But
it's like, again, going back to the corporate analogy. If you're like working away at your job and like someone who was on the board walks in, you don't know. He's not going to talk to your boss about what you were doing unless you really screw up.
Yeah.
But it still makes you nervous to have like someone from the board like standing there.
Fair enough. She may be right. There's a bunch of descriptions here of what the stone looks like, and they're interesting and all, but I don't know how much we want to go into them. Perrin is walking along, and he kind of observes how the paths twist and turn, and there's arrow slits that would make you vulnerable to defenders if they were ever used, but they never have been, and murder holes in the ceiling and things like that. But if you read a lot of fantasy, you know what a murder hole is and what an arrow slit looks like. And,
sure.
Yeah.
It's a castle designed to be defended from invaders, and they totally failed to do that because the Aiel weren't really coming in from the outside. They were, they were already inside the house,
slitting throats,
totally
being badass.
No one was like ready to man the murder holes, and he's basically running to get there because he's nervous.
Yeah, he says he's walking very quickly, but trying to slow himself down because Faile's walking next to him. But I think also kind of angry and ready to confront Rand, so this makes sense in an emotional way. Stepping out into a shadowed corridor, nearly at the top of the stone, he found himself staring at the backs of a High Lord and two of the nobleman's personal guards. Only the defenders were allowed to wear armor inside the stone, but these three had swords at their hips. That was not unusual, of course, but their presence here, on this floor, in the shadows, staring intently at the bright light at the far end of the hall, that was not usual at all. That light came from the anteroom in front of the chambers Rand had been given, or taken, or maybe pushed into by Moraine. And so there's this weird sort of confrontation.
Yeah, this is the High Lord Torean and a couple of his men.
Yeah.
High Lord Torean is the father of Estion, the drunk at the game.
So the most powerful nobleman in the land.
Basically.
Up tier.
Yeah. And he's basically a traitor to Rand. He's not a dark friend, but he serves under Weramon, who is a dark friend. And he just has the attitude that, the worst of the nobles have, which is we should be able to do whatever we want. We're super powerful. He's the one who Rand tells him to make a treaty with Mayenne, and he basically makes a treaty saying, yeah, we're going to invade your country. Right? That's good, right? And Rand's like, no, go back and make the treaty I want, or I'm going to have you arrested and killed. And then he ends up like sacrificing a bunch of his money. And here what you can see he's doing is basically why he's looking at the chamber and sweating with perfume is he's trying to get Barillon. And so he's waiting for her to come out so he can basically ambush her and like convince her to do something. I think he's using his power and his protection, and he wants to offer that to her and say basically sleep with me and I'll protect Mayen, and if you don't, I'll have it invaded.
Or something.
Something along those lines. I mean, I'm making it up a little bit, but because we don't get a whole lot of information, but there is a confrontation between him and Barillon here later. He's in a power abusive, arrogant noble who thinks he can take whatever he wants.
Yeah. The light illumine you, he said politely. His glance... The light illumine you, he said politely. His glance touched Perrin's yellow stare and flinched away, though his expression did not change. You are well, I trust? Perhaps too politely. Perrin did not really care for the man's tone, but the way Torean looked Faile up and down, with a sort of casual interest, clenched his fists. He managed to keep his voice level, though. The light illumine you, the High Lord Torean. I am glad to see you help keeping watch over the Lord Dragon. Some men in your place might resent him being here. Torean's thin eyebrows twitched. Prophecy has been fulfilled, and Tyr has fulfilled its place in that prophecy. Perhaps the Dragon Reborn will lead Tyr to a still greater destiny. What man could resent that? But it is late. A good night to you. He eyed Faile again, pursing his lips, and walked off down the hall a bit too briskly, away from the anteroom's lights. His bodyguards heeled him like well-trained dogs. There was no need for you to be uncivil, Faile said, in a tight voice when the High Lord was out of hearing. You sounded as if your tongue were frozen in iron. If you do intend to remain here, you had better learn to get on with the lords. He was looking at you as if he wanted to dandle you on his knee, and I do not mean like a father, she sniffed dismissively. He's not the first man ever to look at me. If he found the nerve to try more, I could put him in his place with a frown and a glance. I do not need you to speak for me, Perrin Ibarra. Still, she did not sound entirely displeased.
Stop hitting on my girlfriend.
I think... possibly for the first time during this read, I realized that Faile doesn't seem displeased because Perrin is jealous and she likes that.
Yeah, totally.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, she's out there like happy that Perrin is being that
or that some goofy looking High Lord looked at her.
Right.
That's not what is pleasing her.
No, definitely not.
But she's like, oh, he cares about me enough that he's annoyed or, thinks this powerful man might carry me away or something.
He's got a little bit of healthy jealousy.
Fair enough. I also noticed right after this, Perrin's like nice to Berlain and Faile's like meh, 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 meh. And it's the same thing happens, but in reverse.
I have so much to say about that.
I kind of glazed over it. I don't know if you actually wanted to talk about that, but it's the same thing. They're doing the same
just
thing.
Look at what happens from Perrin's point of view. Is they're walking around, and he sweeps this great, majestic bow to Berlain, who Faile hates.
Because Perrin's like, let me show her how polite I can be.
She's like, you could be civil,
but she interprets it in a totally different way.
She doesn't want him to be civil to Berlain. She wants him to be civil to the High Lords.
Right.
He does this big bow, and then Berlain walks away, and he just turns and watches her go right in front of his girlfriend.
Does he? Does it say that?
Yeah, totally.
Staring after her.
As Berlain rushed past them without a glance, the smell of fear, rank and raw as a festering wound, made his nostrils twitch. He straightened slowly, staring after her. So he's staring after her because she smells terrified, and he's like, what is that smell? But to Faile, it looks like he's just checking out her butt.
Yeah. And then, of course, he just trails off saying, she smelled like... And then I do not care if she smelled like the essence of dawn. And then she says, that one is not interested in hunting a bear. However fine his hide would look stretched on a wall, she hunts the sun. He frowned at her. The sun? A bear? What are you talking about?
She's like, you and Rand? You're the bear, he's the sun?
It's a direct analogy,
Yeah,
Perrin.
It's not hard to substitute that one in. I know she didn't say wolf and dragon, but it's about as close as you can get.
And then I also was a little interested in this when she dismisses herself, and right after that, the sun, a bear, what are you talking about? You go on by yourself, she responds. I think I will go to my bed after all. If that's what you want, he said slowly. But I thought you were as eager to find out what happened as I am. I think not. I'll not pretend I'm eager to meet the Rand, not after avoiding it until now. But I think that she's off to do something?
I think she thinks that Rand and Berelain just had a tryst, and that Perrin's going to go in and basically do the fist bumping, like, yeah, bro. And she's like, I don't need to be there for that.
Oh, I guess. I mean, that could be, but I kind of feel like, right, Perrin is dense, just like Aradia just said. He doesn't understand what's going on around him, often past the kind of the immediate observable level.
Right.
But Faile is not like that. She sees all these things happening. She sees what's going on. And I think that she's off to plot. Meeting Rand is not particularly important. I don't really see how it would help or hurt her in any way, especially since Perrin's already as close to him as anyone is.
Yeah, and she says, I think you'll two will have a nice talk, especially if there's wine. I think she thinks there's just going to be two buddies, just like we're doing, getting together over wine, drinking, and talking about, like, what happened that night.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't need to be there.
Fair enough.
And maybe she thinks that something to do with Berelain caused the Rand to go nuts and attack Perrin somehow. That maybe, I don't know. I this is actually one of those scenes that has always really, I don't know why she changes her mind. They run into Berelain, and then Faile's like, yeah, I don't need to see Rand. So something about Berelain made her decide not to go meet Rand.
Tybo is asking, doesn't she go after Berelain? But I don't
think so.
That's like a little bit later where Faile confronts Berelain and they actually fight in a hallway.
Because at this point, Berelain is not interested in Perrin yet.
And then Dad shows up and he's like, hey, go to your rooms. And they do.
You mean Rourke?
Yes.
Yeah. But at this point, she's still got her sights set on Rand and is terrified and hasn't reset. She spends about 2 seconds looking at Matt and is like, nope. And after this, she's never interested around Rand again.
Did you just make that meme, Cody? I've never seen that before.
That's great. It shows a guy snorting coke. The coke is labeled herbal scent.
And the guy is labeled Perrin.
The guy is Perrin.
He is really into it. But, I mean, I feel like, all right, maybe this is TMI and maybe we should cut it later. But I feel like it's really realistic that, like, I can, at least speaking from experience, when you're really attracted to someone, their smell starts to mean more and more. And the more infatuated you become, the more intoxicating.
Some people might even say it's backwards, that a lot of our attraction to people has to do with how they smell. And that our body, we respond to that because we get so many pheromones and sort of clues about somebody's health. And
it's a real thing.
Yeah, totally.
Did you ever read about that experiment where a bunch of women were asked to smell the sweaty shirts of various men, and there's based on their genetics, there's some correlation to like which sense they rated as attractive, and like if they were smelled their brother's sweaty shirt, they thought it was like horrid and disgusting, and they smell some young, attractive, athletic guys, and they're like that much less likely to rate that as disgusting.
I heard it was like genetically based.
Yeah.
But again, I feel like that's fairly sketchy science with a low number of test points.
Sure, but I'm just using that as an example to promote, or to try to promote my point that, and I know it means a lot to me, maybe everyone else isn't that serious, but
oh no, totally. Every
smell
is super important when you're with somebody. And not to mention, smell is super associated with memory and emotion and bonding and all that kind of stuff.
Oh my God, yeah. This was like a year ago, or 2 years ago, but I was walking through the mall. I was walking through the one on this side of the river, the mall on this side of the river.
Yeah.
Whatever.
A mall.
I had to go to the Verizon store. I was buying a new phone. Walked in there. I was walking through the corridors, like meandering through the mall because it's confusing, I'm pretty sure on purpose, like a casino. And I'm finally getting there, and a young lady walked past me, and I almost stopped and turned because she was wearing the same perfume that my very first serious girlfriend used to wear when I was a teenager. And it just brought me back so fast. It was crazy. And then, also I was like, I can't believe they still make that. That was 10, 15 years ago.
I can still remember. I can definitely remember my first girl's perfume. If I smelled that again, I would know that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I think everyone basically agrees. Anyway, back to the books and less about how Faile smells.
I don't know. It's going to be a large topic of the next 10 books.
That I'll be trying to glaze over, probably.
That's the last time we're going to talk about it, I promise. No.
Unlikely. I wanted to run over this part really quick. Perrin is walking into Rand's, or like the ante-room of Rand's rooms, like his apartments. It's a huge space. It had been the ante-room of the king's chambers in the days when Tyr had kings. Before Archer Hawkwing put everything from the spine of the world to the Aerith Ocean under one king. The Terran kings had not returned when Hawkwing's empire collapsed, and for 1,000 years, the only inhabitants of these apartments had been mice tracking through dust. No High Lord had ever had enough power to dare claim them for his own. And I just thought that was a kind of interesting detail and point to make, that these rooms have stayed empty. The High Lords have their chambers.
Right.
Beneath these. This one is actually huge. I'm imagining it's like the penthouse of the stone. The top floor, this huge, lavish area.
Did you know before elevators, top floors were like the worst apartments you could get?
That kind of makes sense.
Rich people lived on the first floor, and
it's a lot of walking.
Yep.
I understand.
And elevators totally flipped that.
I once lived in a 4th-story walk-up in Brooklyn. Try carrying groceries up that.
Or a couch.
Yeah. And I guess a little on the scale of the room, but a little description of what's happening. So in the ante-room, which is a huge chamber, there are 50 defenders of the stone, all in armor and all their burnished glory and whatever.
Ceremonial defenders.
Blah, blah, blah. But there's 50 of them comfortably in this room. And you walk through that room, and there's another ante-room where there's a bunch of maidens of the spear and other Aiel kind of lurking about in the shadows. Those are the real defenders,
totally.
Perrin notes. Of Rand.
The defenders certainly would stop a certain kind of, like, if 10 Trollocs showed up, the defenders would probably be effective.
Yeah.
It's about all they can handle.
The Aiel would laugh behind their hands as they watched them.
But two of the Aiel here are Bane and Chiad, knowing how involved they become with Perrin later and his whole quest. I think it's funny that they almost cut his head off here. Or at least threatened to.
The real guards were those Perrin met when he strode beyond the columns and approached the doors to Rand chambers. They had been sitting so still behind the columns that they seemed to fade into the stone, though their coats and breeches, in shades of gray and brown, made to hide them in the waist, stood out here as soon as they moved. 6 maidens of the spear, Aiel women, who had chosen a warrior's life over the hearth, flowed between him and the doors on soft laced boots that reached their knees. They were tall for women, the tallest barely a hand shorter than he, sun-darkened, with short-cropped hair, yellow or red or something in between. 2 held curved horn bows with arrows nocked, if not drawn. The others carried small hide bucklers, and 3 or 4 short spears each, short, but with spearheads long enough to stick through a man's body with inches to spare. "I do not think I can let you go in," a woman with flame-colored hair said, smiling slightly to take the sting out of her words. Aiel did not go about grinning as much as other folk, or show a great deal of any other outward emotion for that matter. "I think he does not want to see anyone tonight." "I am going in, Bane." Ignoring her spears, he took her by her upper arms. That was when it became impossible to ignore the spears, since she had managed to get a spear point hard against the side of his throat. For that matter, a somewhat blonder woman named Chiad suddenly had one of her spears on the other side, as if the two were intended to meet somewhere in the middle of his neck. The other women only watched, confident that Bane and Chiad could handle whatever he had done. Still, he did his best. "I don't have time to argue with you. Not that you listen to people who argue with you, as I remember. I'm going in." As gently as he could, he picked up Bane and set her out of his way. Chiad's spear only needed her to breathe on it to draw blood, but after one startled widening of dark blue eyes, Bane abruptly took hers away and grinned. "Would you like to learn a game called Maiden's Kiss, Perrin? You might play well, I think. at the very least, you would learn something. One of the others laughed aloud. She had spear point left his neck.
I mean, he certainly doesn't flinch when there's a spear at his neck, so you would think he's able to keep his mind on what he's doing. She's probably like, yeah, you would probably.
You can think of a game you would be good at. At least you'd learn something.
Mm-hmm.
Something indeed.
Mm-hmm. He might get an education. And he just, like, picked her up and moved her. And she's like, whoa, nice.
Cute, but,
Yeah.
You've got 2 spear points at your neck, and all those other maidens with knocked bows, they're not a threat. Like, what are you gonna... You could cast those 2 aside, and then you're faced with a ton of arrows. Just saying.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean,
the place is defended. These are the 2 that are going to talk. And
it's he's obviously not an enemy. He's just walking in there. I don't know why the whole spear at the neck thing is a little... They're
discouraging him, but also...
And Bane is helping Jihad, and they don't like being touched. That's really like, he goes to move them, and they're like, no.
I think it's also, she's discouraging him, but also there's a... I don't want to... maybe I do want to say a low level of formality to this guarding. So the Aiel trusts the Aiel and the people who they know to be closest to Perrin, or Rand rather. So one of those is Perrin. Matt could probably wander in here and it would be fine. Even if Rand rather said that he didn't want to see them, I feel like they could kind of talk their way in.
And it depends a lot on what the Aiel think, because they are the ones who make that determination. Is like, does Rand actually want to see anybody?
I feel like Moraine could probably just whisk by them and they wouldn't even try to stop her.
No.
And so on. You know what I'm saying? Like you just said, they're making up not arbitrary rules, but Perrin later points out, like, you're guarding Rand like the Defenders of the Stone, but you certainly aren't doing it in the same way. And they're like, yeah, well, we're not guarding the Dragon Reborn. We're guarding He Who Comes with the Dawn.
Sure.
And they're kind of pointing out, although, none of the characters in the series are going to learn this until later, that this vast cultural difference really means a lot more than we know about yet.
I was thinking of a quote where Rand is in his room and the maidens let somebody in, and they go, yeah, she stuck her head in, looked around, and then let herself in. He had yet to figure out what would stop them from coming in. Like, they stick their head in, like, if he's in his bath, if he's in his small clothes, if he's, like, bleeding, they just stick their head in and come on in.
Well, none of those things matter to them. But
no.
If Rand was making out with a lady, they would back out.
Yeah, they're not okay with PDA.
If he was crying, they would probably back out.
Maybe.
Those outward expressions of emotion are considered to be the obscene things.
Right. Not
nudity. Nudity is just like, that's it. That's what you're made out of. It's not weird, man.
Why are you wearing that human skin? Yeah, and the other reason they're stopping anyone from going in is they're like, well, you're not nearly as cute as the girl he just kicked out.
Right.
So why do you think he wants to see you?
I forget what she says exactly. Like, good luck. He just threw out what most men would consider much better company than you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He has already chased out what most men would consider much better company by far than you.
You got that pretty good.
Yeah.
It's like you just read this chapter an hour ago.
Huh. Kind of like that.
So he walks in and sees Rand just bleeding everywhere, leaking blood from all the little cuts, and then gushing blood from his side.
Broken mirrors, blood everywhere.
Why is his side broken open?
Bubble of evil.
Bubble of evil. He's exposed to the taint.
An incredibly powerful one that was all over the place. Yes, Radia, casually dying. He's just kind of bummed, laying there, sitting there, bleeding out.
But for now, he only wanted to sit and remember a shepherd named Rand al'Thor.
But the end of the previous chapter. Yeah.
And that's what he's doing, and kind of dying.
I'll read this little part because it's important to the plot. Broken mirrors hung on the walls, and broken glass covered the floor, along with shards of shattered porcelain and feathers from the slashed mattress. Open books lay tumbled among overturned chairs and benches, and Rand was sitting at the foot of his bed, slumped against one of the bedposts, with eyes closed and hands limp atop Kalendor, which lay across his knees. He looked as if he had taken a bath in blood. Get Moraine, Perrin snapped at the Aiel women. Was Rand still alive? If he was, he needed Aes Sedai healing to stay that way, Tell her to hurry. He heard a gasp behind him, then soft boots running. Rand lifted his head. His face was a smeared mask. Shut the door. Moraine will be here soon, Rand. Rest easy. She will shut the door, Perrin. Is how I imagine that.
Hold
He's
the
like,
door,
you
Perrin.
just
Hold
this
the
is
door, Perrin. No,
And he does. Tearing a strip of wildly sliced linen sheet, he wadded it against the wound in Rand's side. Blood soaked through almost immediately. I'm skipping around a bit, but Perrin says something like, "What under the light were you trying to do?" And Rand says, "It wasn't me."
And he has to tell everybody. Moraine comes in and is like, "You got to learn to control yourself a little better." And he's like, "It wasn't me." Matt's out there being like, "God damn it, why is Rand trying to kill me?" I don't even know if he ever figures out that it wasn't. He must find out later.
Yeah. Well, certainly other things start to happen around all of them that are similar later. "Not me," Rand said finally in a near whisper. "One of the Forsaken." Perrin says, "Are you sure?" Rand says, "Yes, definitely." And then Perrin says, "Where's Matt? Did he come to yell at you yet? Because if he's not, what if he's dead?" And Rand's like, "Well, nothing for it now."
Yeah, it's too late.
It's, yeah.
Gotta save himself.
If he's dead, then he's dead, so.
Well, and he's heading straight to Tom.
Yeah. Matt's like, "I'm getting the fuck out of here."
So he goes to Tom's?
Yeah. Because he wants Tom to come with him.
Got it.
He even gives a pitch.
Yeah.
In the
We'll
next
get that
chapter.
in the next chapter.
Yeah.
But I think that's funny that he...
It's like, "Tom,
wanna
look,
get out of here.
You could be making a ton of money. We could be going to these places where nobody even knows their Dragon Reborn exists, and they think Murdral or Grandma's tales to scare children."
And Tom's like, "Sure, we'll go in the morning."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, let's play this game now." And he's like, "Okay."
"Tell your stories, sing your songs, make some money. I'll find a dice game. We'll forget all of this." Yeah. And Tom's like, "Have a drink. Sit down. We'll talk about this in the morning." Very wise. Once the emotions wear off, he's not going anywhere.
No, his obligation keeps him there.
Yeah. But also the money and pretty girls. Or maybe that's just what he tells himself.
I think that's just what he tells himself. He can get money and pretty girls anywhere he goes.
That's true. He even gets money and pretty girls in the Aiel Waste.
Yeah, he gets some like ridiculously nice like gold and some dark friend chick. He totally...
Who tries to kill him, so maybe not such a score, buddy, but...
The dagger in her chest haunts him for a while.
Yeah, well, fair enough. We're sleeping together. That's...
She definitely got stuck.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. That's a pun. No. I thought you meant she got stuck like she has to kill him and she has no choice.
That too.
She has to try.
Yeah.
Perrin asks, and I feel like this is important because it turns into... This is Rand's mindset for a lot of the series. And Perrin asks, "What are you going to do if he's gone?" Still referring to Matt, I think. "Or dead, the light sended not so. What they least expect." Rand's eyes looked like morning mist covering the dawn, blue-gray with feverish glow, seeping through. His voice had a knife edge. "That is what I have to do in any case. What everyone least expects."
Yeah, that's totally a sane dude. No insanity going on there whatsoever.
"What's that?" he asked quietly. "I only know I have to catch them by surprise. Catch everyone by surprise," he muttered fiercely. Ooh.
Well, and that's where he's going to go to the Aiel Waste and recruit all the Aiel, which is... everyone else expects him to use Tyr to go to war against their ancient enemies, the Illianers.
Yeah.
And he has no intention of doing that. He's
Right.
doing something they totally don't predict, which is heading off into the Waste, away from all of this stuff.
"I would like to know what happened," Moraine said, gliding into the room. She shows up. Slight and slender as she was, Ruark towered over her as much as the man who followed her in, Lan, her warder. But it was the Aes Sedai who dominated the room. She must have run to come so fast, but she was calm as a frozen lake, now. It took a great deal to ruffle Moraine's serenity. Her blue silk gown had a high lace neck, and sleeves slashed with darker velvet, but the heat and humidity did not appear to touch her. A small blue stone, suspended on her forehead from a fine golden chain in her dark hair, flashed in the light, emphasizing the absence of the slightest sheen of sweat. As always when they met, Lan and Ruark's icy blue stares nearly struck sparks. A braided leather cord held Lan's dark hair, gray-streaked at the temples. His face looked to have been carved from rock, all hard planes and angles, and his sword rode his hip like part of his body. Perrin was not sure which of the two men was more deadly, but he thought a mouse could starve on the difference. The warder's eyes swung to Rand.
I would bet on Lan in a fight. But like I said, a mouse could starve on the difference.
Yeah.
I love that they bond over making fun of Rand.
The warder's eyes swung to Rand. Thought you were old enough to shave without someone to guide your hand. Ruark smiled. A slight smile, but the first Perrin had ever seen from him in Lan's presence. He's young yet. He'll learn. Lan glanced back at the Aiel men, then returned the smile, just as slightly. Moraine gave the two men a brief, withering look. She did not seem to pick her way as she crossed the carpet, but she stepped so lightly, holding her skirts up, that not one shard of glass crunched under her slippers. Her eyes swept around the room, taking in the smallest details. Perrin was sure. For a moment she studied him. He did not meet her gaze. She knew too much about him for comfort, but she bore down on Rand like a silent, silken avalanche, icy, God damn it. Icy and inexorable.
Oh, they edited out the goddammit in my book.
Icy, and I can't say this word. Icy and inexorable. I loved that last line a lot. She bore down on Rand like a silent, silken avalanche, icy and inexorable. Still struggling with that word, but it's beautiful.
Uh-huh. It's very... I think a lot of Lake Moraine.
Yeah. Moraine is also... Isn't it also a synonym for serenity?
I'm going to go with yes.
Not the same spelling. Morain.
And it's a glacier lake, which is why it's cold and icy.
At least you are alive. Her voice was musical. A chill, angry music at the moment. What happened can wait. Try to touch the true source. Why? Rand asked in a very wary voice. I cannot heal myself. Even if I knew how to heal. No one can. I know that much. Only some of the strength for healing comes from the healer. The power can replace what comes from the healed. Without it, you will spend tomorrow flat on your back, and perhaps the next day as well. Now draw on the power, if you can, but do nothing with it. Simply hold it. Use this, if you must. She did not have to bend far to touch Callandor. Rand moved the sword from under her hand. Simply hold it, you say? He sounded about to laugh out loud. Very well. Nothing happened that Perrin could see. Not that he expected to. But Rand can't touch the true source. I cannot even reach the void. I can't seem to concentrate. I do not understand why. And I will do it, as I always have, Moraine said, and took Rand's head in her hands, careless of the blood that ran over her fingers. Rand lurched to his feet with a roaring gasp, as if all the breath were being squeezed from his lungs, back arcing, so his head nearly tore free of her grasp. One arm flung wide, fingers spread and bending back so far it seemed they must break. The other hand clamped down on Callandor's hilt, the muscles of that arm knotting visibly into cramps. He shook like cloth caught in a windstorm. Dark flakes of dried blood fell, and bits of glass tinkled onto the chest and floor, forced out of cuts closing up and knitting themselves together. Perrin shivered as that windstorm roared around him.
So that was the quote where she asked him to embrace the source?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing that I don't think comes up a whole lot, because with the change in healing that Nynaeve comes up with, the strength doesn't end up coming from the person who's healed.
Right, so it doesn't matter very much.
But that's an interesting thing that I'm not sure how often it comes into play that a channeler can embrace the source in order to sort of use the power that he's holding to fuel the healing rather than his own energy.
Right, at least partly. Moraine says this will make it much easier if you can do this, but he can't. So she says, fine.
So he ends
lay
up
flat on your back for 2 days.
Exactly. And he ends up like collapsing at the end of this thing onto a chest, and like as Perrin's leaving, the maidens are like, all right, if you can stand up, you can go. And he can't stand up.
Oh. Rand tells him to leave, and they're like, yeah, we'll leave if you can stand up.
And then they stay. And he's
yeah.
like, okay.
They're going to wash him. That's what they're going to do.
Rand as the son of a maiden. Maiden is another word for virgin, even though it's not necessarily used in this context.
Oh, I noticed that on my first read through.
Yeah. I just something I don't think we'd ever said before, but like Ran as the son of a maiden is essentially a virgin birth.
Yeah.
Just another Jesus parallel going on there.
Except these maidens sleep with people.
Well, yes. It's definitely Jordan playing
casually
with the definition of the word maiden.
Right, I liked that he did that.
Because maiden can also be, a term for a virgin. And in this case, it's just a term for a warrior.
Or a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a warrior woman.
Yeah. I'll read another part that I found. Oh, actually, I really like this whole part. For a couple different reasons. Moraine frowned. This is after the healing. It still does not respond, she murmured half to herself. It will not heal completely, referring to the wound in Rand's side. This is the one that will kill me, isn't it? He asked her softly, then quoted, his blood on the rocks of Shael Ghul, washing away the shadow, sacrifice for man's salvation. You read too much, she said sharply, and understand too little. Do you understand more? If you do, then tell me. He's only trying to find his way, Lan said suddenly. No man likes to run forward blindly when he knows there is a cliff somewhere ahead. Perrin gave a twitch of surprise. Lan almost never disagreed with Moraine, or at least not where anyone could overhear. He and Rand had been spending a good deal of time together, though, practicing the sword. Moraine's dark eyes flashed, but what she said was, he needs to be in bed. Will you ask that washwater be brought, and another bedchamber prepared? This one needs a thorough cleaning, and a new mattress. Lan nodded, and put his head into the anteroom for a moment, speaking quietly. I will sleep here, Moraine. Letting go of the bedpost, Rand pushed himself erect, grounding Callandor's point on the littered carpet, and resting both hands on the hilt. If he leaned a little on the sword, it did not show much. I won't be chased any more, not even out of a bed. Taishar Manetheren, Lan murmured.
Mom and Dad are fighting.
I just really liked that Lan was like...
Taishar Manetheren.
Head nod.
Yeah.
Okay, I see you.
Yeah, you're standing up. You're exhausted.
Won't even be chased out of this shitty bed that's covered in blood and glass.
I'm sleeping here.
This is my bed.
My bed. I mean, if we're talking about Lan's evolution, this is a big signpost on his change in loyalties from being loyal to whatever Moraine says to Nynaeve and, by extension, Rand.
Yeah. Perrin edged towards the doors. If Rand and the Aes Sedai were going to match wills, he would just as soon be elsewhere. Let them fight privately, I suppose.
I'm thinking back to the beginning of The Dragon Reborn, when Moraine and Rand would have yelling arguments in the mountains for and it was months of where they were holed up in the mountains.
Yeah.
And they're just yelling at each other constantly. And Perrin's like, I've seen enough of that. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Wise. But Moraine makes him stay there. Stubborn, Moraine muttered. Very well. If you mean to stand there until you drop, you can use the time before you fall on your face to tell me what occurred here. I cannot teach you. But if you tell me, perhaps I can see what you did wrong. I did nothing except for survive, Rand responds essentially. And this is where he explains to Moraine, no, I didn't do anything.
Yeah, I was just trying to... Something attacked me. I wasn't the cause of all of this damage. Flashing back to that scene in the mountains when the mountains shook and Leah got her face cut up and Perrin confronted and Rand was like, I just can't control it. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Perrin thinks it's a similar situation.
Right.
But it's actually this totally new thing, which is these bubbles of evil.
And then Rand insists, no, it must have been one of the Forsaken, and maybe, like you said, Samael is an Ilian, right? Maybe it was him. Could he reach me from here? And Moraine's like, no, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, then he's here.
Yeah.
Because something happened and it wasn't me. And then Moraine launches into an explanation.
She says it's both too simple and too complex. And I think it's weirdly reality altering that's too complex for the power to do. But at the same time, the motivation, it doesn't have a motivation behind it. It's a kind of random attack.
Yeah.
And so she's like, there's two reasons why this couldn't be a person. And it's just a natural phenomenon of the Dark One.
Yeah. As the seals holding the Dark One's prison weaken, she said after a time, it may be inevitable that a miasma will escape even while he is still held, like bubbles rising from the things rotting on the bottom of a pond. but these bubbles will drift through the pattern until they attach to a thread and burst.
Miasma, a highly unpleasant or unhealthy smell or vapor.
Yeah.
I'd say the Dark One's taint is somewhat unhealthy.
Miasmic. And she goes on to explain bubbles of evil, and you guys get what bubbles of evil are, how they work.
Mm-hmm.
They float up just like that little description I feel like is perfect. Have you ever walked through a swamp or basically standing water on top of rotting vegetation or a dead animal?
Or farted in a pool?
Sure. Yeah. So same kind of effect, there's dead, rotten vegetation at the bottom of a pond, and if it's even disturbed slightly, all these bubbles rise, and then they come through the surface, and you want to puke because it's rotten filth.
Well, that's the result of decomposing plant matter, and it releases carbon dioxide and mostly sulfur, I think is what smells bad.
Yeah. There's little creatures that live in there
eating
bit of
methane.
Stuff, and the byproduct is methane gas and probably other stuff.
And going back to my Rand is the sun, and Matt and Perrin are planets, and everybody else is just standing on their surface theory of Taviran. If you release a bubble of evil, it gets sucked sort of into the gravitational pull of the Taviran.
Yeah. So it's going to be most likely to move towards them. But, of course, as there's more and more of the bubbles of evil rising to the surface of the pond, that's the pattern. That's not a very good analogy, but something like that. As there's more and more, some of them will just randomly disperse, and weird things will happen not even associated with Rand or Perrin or Matt.
Sure. And there's a scene later in the White Tower where the Aes Sedai are getting all these weird reports of all these things happening all over the world, and the girls are like, yeah, those are bubbles of evil. And they're like, no, those are fabrications. That couldn't actually happen. And we're like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
You guys are so far behind.
Oh my god, the Aes Sedai. In the tower. And Paige and Nile as well often suffers from books delayed information.
There's a thing that I always kind of thought RJ did on purpose, the White Tower as, symbol, a White Tower. These, well-educated people up in the their White Towers, studying their books, don't actually understand how the world works. And this is, a very common...
The Ivory Tower is generally
Tower,
yes,
right.
That's how it's explained. Academic Ivory Tower, where you sort of get really involved in your really specific area of study and you kind of forget the context that it sits in, and that can lead to some really odd academic opinions.
I feel like RJ really uses that and does that on purpose, where we kind of see this phenomena where Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine, and so some other few women who have been out in the world actually seeing what's happening are able to come back and topple everything and kind of demonstrate that they really have a better understanding of what's happening to the world than these women who have literally never left their ivory tower. In some cases, some of them really haven't actually left the tower at all.
No, and we've talked about the best Aes Sedai are the ones who are out in the world. Moraine, Varen, even Adelius and Van Deen, I think, are better Aes Sedai than a lot of the women in the tower, because they're at least living in a village out in the real world doing their research.
And there's certainly something to be said for that as well. There's, Varen's out in the world, so she's a bad example of a brown, really, or the stereotype of a brown. But that's, there's something to be said for that, too. We need academics, but we also need people who are out there figuring out what's happening. You can't just read about it.
And the Aes Sedai have a long history of cloistering themselves to the point where they are not useful.
I should clarify, you can't just read about it and expect a complete understanding of the entire problem. You can read about it and get a good understanding of it, but you kind of need to combine that with, you have an architect, engineers, and then you have contractors. If you're going to, you need a full span of, the architect might never leave a room.
I'm a fantastic basketball player. I've read every article on basketball I can find.
Yeah, no, of course not.
Yeah, that's not how that works. Not saying that reading those articles couldn't help a solid basketball player have better strategy and learn more about his opponents and all that kind of stuff, but there's a physical practice that is a kind of learning,
Sure.
an experienced learning, which is different from academic learning.
And there's different things. Like, that's not to say that the architect isn't absolutely necessary to the building project, you know. As the architect comes up with these amazing idea, and the engineer's like, to actually do this, here's how you would have to do it. And then, you know, there's a redesign, and then they give the plans to people who go out, dig the hole, and they're like, shit, it's filled with water. And they're like, all right.
Or that's an excellent idea for a joint, but I can't get my hand in there to put it together.
Yeah.
Ruark brings up Matt and says he saw him alive walking, and we know he ends up, which is the transition into him going to Tom.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to read, suddenly one of the doors opened, and Bane and Chiad slipped in, without their spears. Bane was carrying a large water bowl, and a fat pitcher with steam rising from the top. Chiad had towels folded under her arm. "Why are you bringing this?" Moraine demanded. Chiad shrugged. She would not come in. Rand barked a laugh. "Even the servants know enough to stay clear of me. Put it anywhere."
I mean...
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Fair. And Moraine kind of gives him a long warning that I'm going to glaze over, where she says, like, your time's running out, like, you have to do something. And Rand's like, yeah, no.
Mm-hmm. He's like, I've got plans. And she's like, tell me what they are. And he's like, nope. And he's basically saying, I'm the one who gets to decide. So I'll take your advice, but you don't get to tell me what to do.
Yeah. Thought it was sort of interesting that Rand says, all of you go away, please. We'll he's just like, we'll talk about this more tomorrow. I just want to lay down and be done with this goddamn day.
And in particular, Rand wants to talk to Perrin. Sort of, he flicks his eyes at Perrin in particular and is like, we're going to talk tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Well, he looked at Perrin as if trying to tell him something without words, something he did not want the others to hear. Perrin had not a clue what it was. After a moment, Rand sighed. His head sank a little. I want sleep. All of you, go away. I think Rand is like, he wants everyone to leave except Perrin.
I think he's just saying, I want to talk to you tomorrow about this.
Yeah. Or, along those lines.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick search, and I don't see their next encounter. I'm not sure they get a chance to talk before the stone is invaded by Trollocs.
Oh, yeah. Well, after that, I just kind of wanted to point out that Perrin watches Moraine quickly cross the room, and after that, and talks to Bane and Chiad, who are still holding the towels and water to clean all the caked dried blood off of Rand. And Perrin tries to listen, and Perrin heard only a buzz and wondered if she was using the power to stop him from eavesdropping. And then Bane and Chiad respond, and he realizes he still can't hear them.
Yeah, they're definitely...
She's telling them something about Rand, what she wants them to do or something.
I have no ideas what she could be telling them.
And the only clue we get is the Aiel women looked at Rand as they listened, and they smelled wary. Not afraid, but as if Rand were a large animal, would be dangerous if they misstepped. I think she's telling them, like, listen, he wants us all to leave, but someone has to clean the wounds.
Take care of him.
Yeah, take care of him. And, but Rand is a wounded bull, and these are two young girls who have to take care of this wounded bull. So they're like, okay, here we go.
There's one part here where the glass gets pushed off the chest so that Rand can have a seat, and Perrin's like, I don't know if that was Moraine or Rand. Rand's too tired to touch the one power. That's Moraine cleaning the chest off for him to sit down.
Oh, probably.
And it has to be.
Aradia agrees. It's seconded.
Perrin's speculating about why Forsaken don't go mad, and we know it's because they have a connection to the Dark One.
You're right, so the Dark One's touch is filtered. Perrin nodded and followed Ruark out of the room. Moraine and Lan were nowhere in sight. The Terran officer was staring at the doors from 10 paces off, trying to pretend the distance was his choice, and had nothing to do with the 4 Aiel women watching him. The other 2 maidens were still in the bedchamber, Perrin realized. He heard voices from the room. Go away, Rand said tiredly. Just put that down and go away. If you can stand up, Chiad said cheerfully, we will. Only stand. There was the sound of water splashing into a bowl. We have tended to the wounded before, Bane said in soothing tones, and I used to wash my brothers when they were little. Ruark pushed the door shut, cutting off the rest. You did not treat him the way the Terrans do, Perrin said quietly. No bowing and scraping. I don't think I have heard one of you call him the Lord Dragon. The Dragon Reborn is a Wetlander prophecy, Ruark said. Ours is he who comes with the dawn. I thought they were the same, Perrin's responding. Else, why did you come to the stone? Burn me, Ruark. You Aiel are the people of the dragon, just as the prophecies say. You've as good as admitted it, even if you won't say it out loud. Ruark ignored the last part. In your prophecies of the dragon, the fall of the stone and the taking of Kalandor proclaim that the dragon has been reborn. Our prophecies say only that the stone must fall before he who comes with the dawn appears to take us back to what was ours. They may be one man, but I doubt even the wise ones could say for sure if Rand is the one. There are things he must do yet to prove it. What? Perrin demanded. If he is the one, he will know, and do them. If he does not, then our search still goes on. Something unreadable in the Aielman's voice pricked Perrin's ears. And if he isn't the one you search for? What then, Ruark? Sleep well and safely, Perrin. Ruark's soft boots made no sound on the black marble as he walked away. The Terran officer was still staring past the maidens, smelling of fear, failing to mask the anger and hatred on his face. If the Aiel decided Rand was not he who comes with the dawn, Perrin studied the Terran officer's face and thought of the maidens not being there, of the stone empty of Aiel, and he shivered. He had to make sure Faile decided to leave. That was all there was for it. She had to decide to go, and without him.
Yeah, I mean, he really does have to go to the waste, or he's going to lose the Aiel people.
And he's going to die. Someone's going to kill him.
You going to die. Yeah. I mean, he is facing all...
A lot of people want him dead.
Yeah. He really does have to go to the waste just to escape the attacks of the Forsaken.
And be forever surrounded with a bunch of maidens,
Mm-hmm.
which is a serious cushion. And, God, I wish Rand would just let them later.
Well, that's
Damn
a whole
it.
issue. Yeah.
Just accept.
Oof.
They're so good at what they do, Rand. They're the best in the world.
And he doesn't let them protect him.
Oh, so frustrating.
You're face-palming right now.
Yes. Yes, Aradia, but they're ovaries.
I don't want the women. There's a scene where he's like...
It makes no difference.
He's like, oh, God, dead woman. And a dead guy, that's okay. And a dead woman. And it's like, you son of a bitch.
They want to. Just let them.
And I almost think that by trying to protect them, he causes more death and damage to them.
Probably. If not to the world, in just the advancement of his cause.
Yeah.
If the Aiel were used like a tool cleverly, we could get a lot of things done much faster.
So a bit of a tangent, but I was going through the visions where when he goes through the stone columns in...
Glass columns.
The glass columns in...
Ruidian.
Ruidian, thank you. So in that vision, he sees the wise ones send the Aiel people away, and it's pretty obvious to me that she's trying to save the Aiel people, not the objects of power. She's like, I want you guys to take these, whatever, objects of power, go find somewhere safe and settle there. And the Aiel interpret it as their job is to take the Terran somewhere safe, but really their job is to find a safe place to live and become the people, the dragon, that Rand needs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. A bunch of boys who have never held anything more dangerous than a rake. Because, that's like most militaries.
You only get a couple weeks of training and then you're off to fight.
Maidens are lifelong professional warriors. It's why defenders of the stone are nothing in comparison.
At best, the noble have, at least some additional training because they're bored and noble and rich and have nothing better to do than to learn to fight with swords.
Sure, and some of them are quite good.
Mm-hmm. I'd also like to point out, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, the Aiel spear, in terms of overall length, is about the same length as a longsword. It's just slightly more hilt and slightly less blade. But it's essentially a sword of different proportions.
Right. Perrin says it's long enough to go all the way through a man and inches to spare, which I think means,
the blade portion of it.
If you stab somebody with this thing to the hilt, the blade would be out the back and more.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
This is the whole thing about the spear being like a hunting weapon. Maybe a long spear is, but the spears the Aiel are fighting with are essentially just swords.
Right.
But they have this weird culture, not weird, but they have this cultural block between using an actual sword. us all of, 2 weeks since the last time I thanked patrons, and you've managed to give me more than 20 more names. So I guess I should get on that. So last time we were thanking patrons, Jonathan Morgantini, tried to get in under the wire by upping his pledge, but he just missed it by like seconds. So he's the first person I get to thank. Morgantini, Lore Master, upped his pledge.
Also known as Agonor.
He has many names.
The Chosen are mysterious.
Grace Chrysler upped her pledge. Ken Paterka upped his pledge.
Thank you guys. You guys hang out all the time and you're awesome.
Kelly Thomas pledged.
Thank you, Kelly.
Trail of Claws.
Trail of Clues.
Interesting.
Trails of Clues.
Karen Duke.
Thanks, Trails. Thanks, Karen.
Joe Gorman.
You're the best, Joe.
Rich Berry.
We appreciate you, Rich.
AJ.
Thanks, AJ.
Kevin Gao.
I'm sticking with that pronunciation.
Yeah.
I think you got it. Gao.
Eric Porter.
Thanks, Eric.
Sir Twin Grain. I hope you make beer, Sir Twin Grain. Kelsey Baldwin upped her pledge.
Kelsey.
Hey, Kelsey. Evan King upped his pledge.
Thank you, Evan. I think you've been around approximately forever. I recognize that name.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the old ones.
Yeah.
Matt Scalf.
Thank you, Matt.
Matthew Clark.
We appreciate you, Matthew.
Andres Hansen.
Andreas?
Andreas? That's probably better. Andreas Hansen.
The S is unusual. I've met Andreas before.
Nathan Sawyer.
Thank you, Nathan.
Neil Main.
Thank you, Neil.
Justin Peterson.
We appreciate you, Justin.
Kyla Phoenix.
Thank you, Kyla.
Rich Wainwright.
There are so many of you. Thank you, Rich.
And that gets us through October. And in November, which we are just starting out, we've had Peter G., Geek 2 Studios.
Thank you, Peter.
And Eula Voros.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Eula Voros? I bet the G is silent.
Geek Studios is an Etsy shop. I looked it up because I was curious about who this studio was that was supporting us. And it's, I think, a youngish artist from Canada that crochets cute, nerdy things. She crochets them. So you could buy like a crocheted Pokeball stress ball or like...
Well, thank you to everybody once again for supporting us. We really appreciate all of the support that we've been getting lately, the increased interest. It's really made a big difference in my life, certainly. I'll say our lives.
Yes, that is true.
It's amazing what you guys are doing for us. So
I have a savings account now, which I didn't when this started. So if that, not saying that we're like raking in the dough or anything, but like you knock a couple bucks off my rent and I can actually start to like
not spend everything on booze and food.
Prosper rather than survive, I guess.
Yeah. I suppose that's really the difference is we're prospering in our lives these days.
Yes.
And that's all thanks to you guys. So thank you very much.
You make our lives better and brighter, Aradia. Stop it.
You especially. And Christine, your cookies are fantastic.
Heck yeah.
Even if I didn't let Patrick have any of the lemon squares.
Christine, I ate some.
Oh, that's right. I didn't leave you
Christine
many.
continues to donate, but we're not sure why, because she sends us cookies. Dude, listen, I might be an adult man, but I still have an appreciation.
Dude, cookies in the mail, like, if you want to make somebody happy, just send them cookies in the mail. Like,
yeah.
There's nothing better. We accept cash, Bitcoin, PayPal, and cookies.
Have you ever, like, I don't know if anyone out there ever went to, like, have you ever been to, like, an underground punk rock show where tickets are $10 or $5 and a can of soup? That's how you... Real thing, guys. I don't know what kind of nerds you are, but these two chapters are kind of the aftermath of the Bubble of Evil. So it's Perrin and Matt walking through the stone after, and they're like, what the hell just happened? Of course, Rand is just bleeding out slowly and staring at his feet.
Just not worrying about it. Yeah. And he's totally nuts.
Well, yeah. I mean, under the circumstances, I might be losing my mind. Throw in a little bit of Sidene.
So where I am now in my audiobook cycle is Lord of Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really before he, Louis Theron's around. LTT is around. But before he really becomes friends with him, because that matures in the box. And Rand is just so crazy.
Yeah.
It's... anyway, so that's a debate I'm going to have to get into when LTT becomes more of a thing. Because I have very specific opinions about how that all works, and not everybody agrees with me.
We've talked about it a bunch, and I think I think we agree, basically.
Right, so we may have to get another voice in on that particular opinion.
I think it's already happening. I think that it's a creeping madness that happens very slowly. I think it's been happening since the Great Hunt. And
yeah, amplified by Kalendor.
Yeah, I think it starts to become really much more obvious after the battle for Cairhien, removing Cúlóden and the Shaido from Cairhien. That battle, not the revolution.
Mm-hmm. But, and I've said this before, my theory is that LTT in Rand's head is an entirely made-up entity.
Yeah?
That's Rand's insanity.
I like it.
That LTT isn't real in any way, shape, or form. Rand's just slowly going insane.
No, LTT's dead.
Yeah.
It's not... He can't be real because they have the same soul.
Right. The argument is, but he has real information. Well, Matt has real information from other men's past lives, and those men aren't in his head talking to him. He just has the memories.
Right. That's different.
And that's very different. And so Rand is actually taking all of his slow creeping insanity, splitting his own personality into two parts, which is Rand the sheep herder and LTT, this insane voice in his head. But that's still Rand going insane.
I agree, and I think the bleed through, the reason Rand actually gets information is because... like we see, I guess in Matt a little maybe, but that you can find out what happened in your past lives, but you're really not supposed to. And there's a barrier there, but the information is there for some reason. It's there somewhere.
For some people, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we'll especially with the old blood coming through with the Manetheren folks. Like, we can see that's something that can happen.
The taint is this thing that degrades...
the barrier.
Yeah.
And so you can get information that passes between those two, but you cannot get a personality that passes between those two.
Because the person is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But the experiences are things that happen. They're real. I feel like it's kind of a vehicle for Rand to tell himself that this isn't him. The information isn't coming from him, but
right.
It is.
And all of that back and forth over who is seizing Saidin, all those internal battles, that is Rand manifesting his insanity and battling his insanity. That it's not that LTT is seizing the source, it's that the insane part of Rand's mind is seizing the source.
My hands.
Yeah, exactly. Why can't I move my hands? And I literally think Rand is splitting his personality off into an insane part and insane sections.
I think you're right. Ogier tendencies. This would be really great debate fodder to make. Like, we could probably make a whole freaking episode on this.
And of course, I will say the other big opinion is that the LTT in Rand's head is a separate existing alternate being.
Yes.
I don't think that's possible because there is no other soul. There is no other being that could be there.
Rand is LTT.
Rand is LTT.
LTT was real.
Right, and Tom Casey,
he just isn't anymore.
Right, and Tom Casey, I think you're confusing two different phenomenon. There's the phenomenon of getting information from your past life, which is just getting information from yourself. You're just remembering
his own experiences.
And then there's the insane voice in his head, which is just insanity. And that insane... Because Rand has... All the time he uses those memories. They are his own memories from his past life.
You know, this is one of those moments where I'd say, like, I wish RJ was around so we could ask him. But you know what he'd probably say? We'll just read the books. It's clearly evident. I just put it... It's in there, so just...
Raffo. Well, especially with Rand's insanity. And I think the most confirmation we get is Semirog's statement. Is like, it's still just a voice in your head. It's worse if it's a real voice. But the voice in his head is a coping mechanism. Exactly, Christine.
I like that, Obi Thunder. Is it easy to figure out? Is it, RJ?
Really?
Showrunner Rafe Judkins assured fans that the show would be a faithful adaptation of the book series. We're committed to making a show that is true to the source material, which means starting off at a fast pace, inevitably slowing down as the story gets more complex, and then having someone else take this baby to the finish when I pass away around season 270. I don't know if he's being serious or not, but I kind of suspect he is. Because if you want to be true to the books, then it has to be way too long.
Well, the spirit of I would disagree. I would think it's just long enough.
I agree. I'm just,
No, it's a pretty good Onion-esque article.
Yeah.
What was the name of the website?
The hard drive? Oh, thehardtimes.net/hard drive/ and then a long series of letters and numbers.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?